into the hall, into the corridor. There's a door in the house. I hear the lift descending. I hear it hit the landing. See the house and the cat standing with my key eye, with my key eye, with my key eye, with my key eye.
Because Shiba won't let you in full of no money. My home, my joy, I'm marred and bolted
No strangers think.
And hello, one and all, welcome back to the SuperCaZt. I'm your host, the man who put super in SuperCaZt, the Super Foch, and joined as always by my co-host and good buddy, Steve Z, the man who put the Z in SuperCaZt. What's up, buddy?
Not much. I'm super excited about this film. It's The Shining, guys. It's The Shining. And
Yes.
it's not, I should say Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, because although it is a novel, it has very little resemblance to the novel. This is definitely a Kubrick thing. It's a personal thing for him, I think, and it's a film that just keeps getting better and better for me. So I'm super excited to talk about it.
Yeah, same here, man. I mean, I don't think even have to have seen this film to know about it. I think this is one of the most talked about films, the most debated films, and there's a lot of stuff that you can debate about this film, and we'll get into a little bit of that here on the SuperCaZt. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I think this is a film that you gotta at least watch once. I think you gotta really, if you're a fan of film, and you're a fan of these kinds of films specifically, this is one of those films you gotta sit through at least one time, and you'll either never want to watch it again, or yeah, that's pretty good. I think I could do that again, and I was the latter. Spoiler alert. And speaking of spoiler alert, we are going to spoil the heck out of this film.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned a minute ago, this film did start out as a novel by the great Stephen King, but it doesn't really resemble the book as much, correct?
No, not really. And I've read the book and I've watched the film several times, and they both have their things about them, and that's kind of my thing where I stand on this issue, because Stephen King, he was not too happy about this adaptation. He actually says this is one of his most hated films, period. And to me, it's probably his, I'm not going to say his best adaptation, because it's basically what Kubrick does with all his films. He reads the books, and then he puts his spin on it, and I would prefer that personally. Because to me, reading a book and watching a film are two different things. Yes, sometimes they accomplish similar goals, but this one, it's way different. I mean, if you get into the actual book, there's a lot of scenes, obviously, that are different. The book is a lot longer. There's a lot more stuff with the house. It actually has more of like a ghost story sort of feel to it, because everything's just hyper extensive. Like there's a lot of times Danny goes in the maze and gets attacked by like random stuff, or he'll be around the hotel and encounter random things that's not in the book. And that one, the big thing that King took the most offense was how they did Jack, how they changed Jack from being like more like crazy, kind of being driven mad by the house or the hotel, I should say. But in King's version, it's the alcohol that does it to him. So that's the big thing, because it's very much an anti-alcoholic theme to it. But Kubrick's, I don't really think plays that up at all, really. I mean, he's hovering alcoholic. That's why it calls the whole thing. But I just don't think it's played up as much. I think that's the isolation, the haunted aspect is played up a lot more in Kubrick's version.
Do you feel like you can be a fan of both the book and the movie, even though they do differ in quite a few ways?
Definitely. I mean, like I said, it's totally a different experience. And that's what I feel about this film, and why I keep enjoying it more and more.
Yeah.
Is I think Stanley Kubrick creates an experience that that's why it's an effective horror film, because to me the best horror films is when you feel like you're part of the atmosphere,
Right.
like you're in the setting.
Right.
And that's the way I feel this. Like this movie, you almost want to bump up the heat a little bit. It's it's a very cold film.
Yes.
And I feel like I go through this experience with these three characters as they go through this ordeal at the Overlook.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I really feel like that there's such a atmosphere in this film that, and I have not read the book. I'm gonna go ahead and say I have not read the novel. So any reference to the novel, you'll have to refer to my buddy here. So I'm not going to say what the book does. So, but is in the movie, it definitely gives you this, well, as you just said, chilly atmosphere, almost from the start. Really, I mean, it's really, and it's obviously helped by the awesome performances of one of our favorite actors, Jack Nicholson, and of course the rest of the cast is great too. Shelley Duvall, we'll get into all of her stuff because there's a lot to unpack for her as well. But the atmosphere, I think if you were going to start with this film as far as unpacking what it is that makes this film great, you got to go with the atmosphere. And with it being an old hotel, and it just, I don't know, it's just great. It's just great. It grabs you, and you really, unless you've seen the film 100 times, but even if you have, like, I've watched this film twice since we decided to do this for this episode. And even though I knew pretty much the story, still things caught me off guard the second time. It still did. That's how good I feel like this film was made. I really feel like that the tension is, very high. The atmosphere is very uncomfortable. And this might be, and you can argue or agree, this might be one of Jack's best performances too. I mean, I know you can say that for pretty much all of his performances, but can you imagine anyone else playing this role and having the effect that he does in this film? I just can't. I think that's one of the big selling points of this film, is what he does with that character and really creeps you out.
What should be done with him?
I don't know.
I don't think that's true. I think you have some very definite ideas about what should be done with Danny, and I'd like to know what they are.
Well, I think maybe he should be taken to a doctor.
You think maybe he should be taken to a doctor?
Yes.
When do you think maybe he should be taken to a doctor?
As soon as possible. As soon as possible. Jack.
I totally agree with you on one of those accounts. I don't think it's his best performance, but I'm not going to argue with you otherwise, because I think it's a brilliant performance. I think he's at the top of his game, and I think Kubrick's helped him out with that obviously a lot. But the man's, he's a genius, and he's made to play this character. But I think any other actor would have played it differently. I think Jack played it his way, and I think that's why Kubrick cast him in this. I think he envisioned that this being played by Jack Nicholson, and he pulls this performance out of Jack. As we'll talk about a little more later, Kubrick's whole philosophy behind acting is, I'm going to make you do as many takes as this takes until it feels so natural that you are living this part. And what a place to go, living this part, going to, probably to me, it's the part, as the older I get, the more I appreciate how scary of an idea and how scary of a plot this is. This is a man who is driven mad to kill his family. And that's just, it's crazy. And Jack definitely makes it believable, like you said. We go there with him. We feel his madness. At the same time, though, he plays it off as, this is not mad to him. This is reality to him. This is the way it should be. Those scenes really stood out to me this time, where goes to the party, where he basically transitions from being there, acting crazy, being all upset, to no, he's now talking to Ghost, I guess, or talking to somebody. And what stands out to me is he is not acting like this is so weird. He is not acting like this is out of the ordinary. He's acting like this is a conversation I have with my friend Lloyd. This is a conversation I have with this random person that spilled stuff on me. That's I think it's really tough to pull off as an actor, because this is unbelievable circumstance, and he makes it seem like this is just matter of fact, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's unsettling I'm sure for a lot of people. It's unsettling to see that, because you're like, I wouldn't act like that. I'd be freaking out. And I probably would be personally too. So to see that, it really does add to this whole vibe that I think the entire film of things are just really not what they should be. I mean, things are just a little bit crazy. It kind of reminded me of this place I went to as a kid with my family. We went to this old hotel, and I don't even remember where it is. That's how terrible of a storyteller I am. But it was like a really old hotel. We went there at the dead of night, and it was like a storm. It was straight out of a Stephen King film, like novel or something. The power went out right when we got there. And that's all I could think about when I was watching this film. It's like, everything that you or I or any sane person would be freaking out about, they're just like, yeah, that's just part of it. And I think that adds to the mystique of the story. And I think what I think Kubrick does very well is he really sets the stage of what you're about to experience. He really gets you, the audience member, to come in and say, okay, you want to experience this? Here, I'll give you an experience. Not a lot of directors can do that, very, very well. Anyway, they can try,
Yeah.
but Kubrick, for some reason, and your guess is as good as mine of why, he is just dead set on really getting you into that atmosphere, and it just adds to the tension, to the fear, and all of that. And so that, if you could say any good thing about this film right away, is he puts you in the seat of the action, pretty much.
Yeah, totally agree. It's I think that is his magic. I think it's part of the magic of this film is how it draws you in, like you were saying, from the get-go, when the music starts, that little gliding over the water, like it hypnotizes me, and it kind of puts me in this trance where I'm just following these characters along, going with them. And to me, I think what it is you're basically look at a lot of paintings, and yeah, he does camera movements and everything, but it's almost like there's a still image, and everything's coming out of that. That's the way I feel when I watch it. Like Nick Jack, when he's doing his performance, he starts off in the center of the frame, but as he moves and around in that, it's kind of like he's coming alive or coming mad. It's a crazy thing to watch. That's how I felt when I was watching it. I hope that makes sense as I explain that.
Yes. Definitely.
It's to me, I don't know why anybody's never said this before, but Wes Anderson kind of just ripped Stanley Kubrick's style off a little bit. They're very similar in the way they frame a shot and what they do with the action in it. Like you said, the setting's great, the feeling's great. To me, it's one of the scariest films ever, even though it's very much a slow burn, like this, almost the slowest burn. Like nothing really scary happens for a long time, other than just little tempting things. Like here's an image of Danny seeing just blood in the hallway and crazy stuff like that. And then as the film goes on, as it draws you in, it just gets crazier and crazier, more unsettling and scary. And I wouldn't say this film is like scare a minute or anything like that. Like you're not going to be on the edge of your seat the whole time, but you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to feel like it's dread or something, like something's going to happen. And to me, it's a really cool film just because you can enjoy it on the story basis, but you can also be scared by it. You can also be freaked out by it. And it's a thing that normally doesn't work in a lot of films, because a lot of films that are this long, you're kind of like, this is kind of boring. This is taking a long time. But because he has you in the palm of his hands and he's taking you from scene to scene like this, and you're just kind of there. It works really well, this pacing. It actually enhances it, I would say.
As you know, scary is a relative term, is it not? I mean, like, what's scary to me may not be scary to you, and vice versa. What this film does, and this film is, I wouldn't say it was scary as much as it was just really, really exciting. There's some excitement there. There's some tension. It's dreadful. I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for. But I don't know that I would say it was scary in the same way I would say, like I said, The Exorcist. I think that this film does a lot of things to keep you interested. I think you're, okay, because you're trying to figure this thing out. You're trying to figure out what's doing this, because it doesn't really say that. I think where The Exorcist kind of jumps from one thing to another and goes to this movie, and it was funny because after watching The Exorcist, I really noticed it. It really makes you think about stuff for a long time, and then you go to something else. Whereas The Exorcist, in my opinion anyways, kind of jumps a little bit. Is that how you kind of felt too, watching this film?
Yeah, I felt like that's what worked for me about this film, and what didn't work for me for The Exorcist was I just never felt like I was experiencing that film until like the last 20-30 minutes when we do get to the actual Exorcist scene. That's the only time where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm here. I feel like I'm present. Other times it feels like I'm watching a documentary or something. Meanwhile, this one is more filmic, and that's why I enjoy this one, because this is not an Exorcist The Shining comparison or anything, but
no.
On a personal level, I went into The Exorcist last time and I wanted to experience more. I wanted to learn more, but there was no more layers for me to discover this time. Maybe in the future I'll come back to it and I'll discover some more stuff. But The Shining, every time I watch it, I learn more. And to me, this time, a lot of the themes really stood out to me more. A lot of the deeper layers of the writing and the stuff that actually we experience, even though we've never totally gone mad or something like Jack in this film. There's a lot of stuff that really clicked for me, and I can't wait to get to that in a second. But before we get to that, just a little teaser. Let's there's two more performances we have to talk about, I think. And that's let's get into Shelley Duvall as Wendy.
Well, Danny had scattered some of his school papers all over the room, and my husband grabbed his arm, to pull him away from him. Used too much strength, and he injured Danny's arm. Something good did come out of it all, because he said, Wendy, I'm never going to touch another drop. And if I do, you can leave me. And he didn't. And he hasn't had any alcohol in 5 months.
That poor girl. Man, there's been a lot said about this woman. And I remember hearing about this film years and years ago, even before I saw it, and hearing about the trauma, really, she experienced making this film. And I mean, it's not hard to see. I mean, she's freaked out on camera pretty much the entire film. Knowing the length that Kubrick went to make this film and really affect Shelley's performance, does that hurt your viewing? Can you separate that? I mean, how do you process, that part of the filmmaking process?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely separate it because of what I've heard her say about the experience. Yes. Right. Yes, she went through trauma. Yes, she had to get, her hair is literally falling out. And she's very nervous on set because Kubrick, just like you said, worked her up into a frenzy. Like, he was always on her, always telling her to act it differently, to do it, because remember, he is trying to create this certain experience or this certain thing from the actor that's natural. And so he took her this place, and she says that I appreciate the experience. I'm happy for it. That being said, I think, and might be controversial, I think he felt like he had to do that. He felt like to get what he wanted to get across, he needed to do that. And I guess I will start to unpack one of my themes here. Is this movie is very much about isolation, but not on the surface. It is the cabin fever thing, the thing they always bring up that that drives Jack crazy. But to me, I think they were isolated at the beginning of this film. I think that Jack, as he's going to get to this job, when he calls Wendy up and tells her he gets it, their conversation feels like their marriage is in two different parts right now. They are not whole. They are not like a married couple. And as this film goes on, they're supposed to be going closer together because they're living, spending all this time in the same building in the same area. But instead, they get further and further apart. And by the end of the film, you never really see them in the same frame with each other. You don't see them in the same scene with each other until there's violence or until there's something crazy happening.
Right.
Same thing with Danny. Danny and Wendy, you see them together a lot early in the film, but later as they become more isolated. Danny gets into his thing. He's just playing with his trucks, exploring this hotel. And then Wendy is by herself, watching TV or talking, having monologues. I think that's kind of what he wanted. And I don't think if he would have pushed her to that depths, she could feel that weight of that isolation. That same thing with Jack. I don't think a lot of people critique him and say he's too mad at the beginning. I'm like, I guess you've never experienced this thing where you feel like you're like going kind of crazy just because of the weight of the world. I mean, the man's unemployed at the beginning. Basically, he's trying to get this job because he's basically been lost his career. He's abused his son. His marriage is in shambles. So obviously the dude is not going to act totally sane at the beginning. So I think Kubrick got these performances out of these guys. So that's why I don't feel bad about it, because otherwise, how can these themes come across? How could these subtle performances come across in this way?
And there's also one other aspect. I agree with everything you just said, by the way. There's also one other aspect, is that this movie was a success. If this movie was a flop, then everybody'd be like, oh, he was just an abusive director and, yada, yada, yada. But because he knew what it took to get a good performance out of his actors, he was willing to go that extra mile that maybe most people wouldn't to get that performance. The only way I can compare that personally is I've been in plays where directors are like, maybe one day I was in rehearsal and I was just checking out for whatever mental reason. He's like, you're better than that. And he would write me and be like, because you're better than that. You're a better actor. And so I kind of see it in that aspect of that Kubrick knew what he had in Jack Nicholson. By then, Jack was Jack. Kubrick knew what he had. He knew that he could get what he got out of Shelley Duvall, apparently. And so he was willing to do that for the sake of the film. Now, again, had the film been a flop, would we be having a different conversation? Maybe, maybe not. But we're not. I mean, the film was a success, and it's a beloved horror flick. So, I agree with you. I think that while, sure, he might have gone a little bit too far, this is a heavy film. You mentioned what Jack's character was going through. I mean, you have to establish that if you're going to get the audience, to understand it. And, that's just it. That's why films are not for everybody. Sometimes you can't watch films that other people can, and if you can't, that's okay. That doesn't make it a bad film, and that doesn't make the process necessarily bad. I mean, I'm glad that Shelley has come out and said, in defense of it now. That looks good, and that's good, because that means that she understood the situation as it not being a personal one, and like, oh, I'm gonna attack Shelley because she's a woman or whatever. But I think there's a million things you could say about that. But I think what you just said is accurate. I think that he knew how to get the best out of people, and that's the best directors. That's what Scorsese does. That's what Spielberg does. I mean, the best directors know what they want. They have a clear vision, and Kubrick does. Even if that vision's a little off and a little unsettling, But that's perfect for this. That's what you want. And I think anything less makes this film a less of a success, in my opinion.
Yeah, and because it is taking all these different themes in, and mental illness it's a huge part of it.
Yeah. Sure.
Like I said, Jack's got this weight on him. Wendy, she's feels like she has to take care of her son now because her husband he's kind of checked out.
I'm a crazy guy. Yeah.
One last thing about the performance of Duvall. She's kind of frail for a good portion of the film, like very weak. But then when she needs to be, she can be kind of strong too, like standing up to Jack.
Stay away from me. Please. Don't hurt me.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
Stay away from me.
Wendy,
Stay away.
darling, light of my life. I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
I think that's a big part of this film is you don't know if what you're seeing is in the head of Danny and Jack or them because they could all be driven mad, but at the same time it's also sort of could be a haunted thing. It could is like a ghost or something. So that's why I think it's kind of neat. It can play on both of those levels because I think very much mental illness is part of this, that Jack is driven mad either by the house, by these ghosts or whatever, or just by this situation of what's happening. I think Kubrick, he kind of captures that pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, this was, 20, 30 years ago when we didn't know the things that we didn't know about mental illness, and we've come a long way. And again, it is unsettling in the film, but it's unsettling because it's real, or it's based in reality anyways. Mental illness can make people do crazy things. We have these conversations now that we didn't 20, 30 years ago. So this film was a little bit ahead of its time, I think, in that respect. And it's an uncomfortable watch, but that's not what we're here to talk about necessarily. No. But I just wanted to make the point there is that what this film talks about and shows, I think, is very important. Yeah, definitely. And it's, you go stay up in a hotel for months and months, see what happens to your mental sanity. I'm pretty sure you might lose it a little bit. You think about how if you just hang out at your house for a few days and don't talk to anybody, it messes with you a little bit. And so the film, that's the important thing when you watch this movie, is you got to realize months are going by. It says so on the thing. It's time going by, and that's why every time we see these actors, they're a little bit different. Even if it's just a week, you know how it is. If you're in a stressful situation, a week can seem like a year. So it's definitely much that, and that's one aspect that really stood out to me this time is that this hotel, or just their whole life, they're all haunted, sort of like by the past. Like we go into this film, and Jack has this guilt that he abused his son. Wendy's got this feeling that this was her husband that did this, and then Danny's like, that's my dad. So they all have that. They're all carrying that, and same time, so a lot of bad stuff happened at this hotel, a lot of scary stuff, a lot of murders and things. So it's just really I can see that all in the film.
Room 237.
You're scared of room 237, ain't you?
No, I ain't.
Mr. Allen, what is in room 237?
Nothing. There ain't nothing in room 237. But you ain't got no business going in there anyway. So stay out. You understand? Stay out.
Yeah, definitely. And this film, I don't care where you've been in your life, you can relate to this film in some sort of way. I guarantee you. And I definitely have. I definitely can. I'm not going to say this is the easiest watch I ever had watching this film. I enjoyed this film for what it is, for what the story was, but it was definitely a hard film to watch because we all had those times where we struggle. And it's not easy because it affects everybody, whether you know it or not. And I think that that's what this film does, probably better than anything, is it shows how each person is affected by the situation. And it's not always the same. You know, some people get angry about it. Some people get sad about it. Some people just kind of mentally check out. And that all kind of happens here in this story. And I didn't expect that going into this film. I didn't realize, I knew that what this film was kind of about, but I didn't realize that it was going to really delve into, besides Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson's characters, I didn't realize it was going to go deep in these others. And I'm so glad that it did, because it just really made that film even so much better, because it really shows, hey, this is what these situations can produce. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And like we were saying, this movie can be appreciated on different levels. I'm just getting super deep with it because that's what stood out to me this time. Just
Same,
the stuff that's woven pretty deep underneath this, like scary scenes of going into hotels rooms with people naked in the bathtub, and
Right.
little girls running in the hall. But it's just it's a very frightening film, and I think the music's a big part of that. These two women, Wendy
Yes.
Carlos and Rachel Elkind,
Yes.
create this sort of, I don't even know how to describe the music. It definitely plays on like sort of Native American themes. It's electronic a little bit at times, and it's unsettling. I remember the first time I ever watched this film, that's what kind of stood out to me. I was like, what is going on with this soundtrack? What is this about? I didn't really like it, but the more I watch it, the more I'm like, you cannot change this music. It puts you in that mindset. It puts you in that feeling, especially whenever it gets kind of crazy at the end, when like Wendy's running around the hotel and seeing like random stuff in every room.
And, you know, again, not to knock on The Exorcist, but I remember one of the things I said about The Exorcist was the lack of soundtrack. And it was really a negative thing for me, whereas in this film, I think that's one of the best things about it. I think that added to this unsettling atmosphere and, you know, the hotel and everything. I think it was perfectly marriage with the visuals. I think it was really, really good.
And as we try to critique this film, I'm really having a hard time doing so. Normally we would critique the child actor in this case. Danny Lloyd is Danny Torrance, but the kid's perfect. I think it's one of the best child acting performances ever, and I don't think Kubrick put him through the same rigor. Mainly because I think kids can kind of get into these state of minds easier. The pretend sort of thing. Pretending you see this, whatever. So it is more natural. It is more easy for the kid to get into it. So I don't think they had to do that. And I don't know, Danny Lloyd, he's pretty good in this film.
Definitely. I think he wasn't. I think he was definitely believable as a kid, and by that I mean like he was a kid. They wrote him as a kid. You know, everything he said was very natural sounding as far as what he was saying, and his acting was on point. I really felt like that because in a film like this, when you got all this stuff going on, kids can sometimes, or animals or whatever, can be a negative because they can bring But I really think he added to this atmosphere, and I think he understood the situation, really, really good, especially for a kid his age. So, yeah, I definitely give him 2 thumbs up for sure. I really enjoyed his performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to critique anything about this film, it's the length maybe, or I think it's not for everybody. Somebody to going in to expect something that's so frightening or so gory or something like that, like a more modern horror film. This one might not be for you. I think some people that don't like scary movies, this might be a good entry point for them because it's not overly scary, but it will definitely freak you out. And to me, it's just a brilliant film that I just continue to love more and more just because of how deep it goes and just how great of a director Kubrick is. He was truly one of our masters. And he, along with this cast, just create this beautiful film that really works on so many levels and brings you into it.
I mean, even just talking about it right now, I'm just like, man, that really was a good film because of the story was an interesting story, relatable. The atmosphere was very creepy, very unsettling, and it had everything you would want in a really good film. I didn't mind the length. I understand that it was a long film, but I feel like if the story's good enough, you don't care. It could be a 4-hour film. If the story's good enough, I'm there. And for me, that's how I was. It was unsettling at times, sure. And I know, I will say this. I probably enjoyed it better the second time, but that's not to say I didn't enjoy it the first time. I think every time I watch this film, it just gets better. And like I said, just sitting here talking about it, I think everything you want in a film like this, it has. And I really tried to think of something like, okay, what did I not like about this film? And not to be fanboyish, but I couldn't really come up with anything, man. It was really, really difficult to do so.
I know, man. I'm right there with you. It's one that if it's not for you, it's not for you. But it's definitely for me, and I think it's a work of art. I think anybody that just loves film should check this one out again, especially in this spooky season. Because it's the time for that. Time to appreciate horror films. I know some people can watch them year round, but I've got so many other movies I got to watch.
On the next episode of the SuperCaZt.
4 years ago, in this quiet forest, in this cozy cabin, something happened. Something so frightening. Something so deadly. Something so evil. We prayed it would never happen again. Now, from the creator of Evil Dead, comes Evil Dead 2.
Episode of the SuperCaZt.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot of fun doing these episodes, watching these films, and talking with these films. Give us your thoughts on the film. Leave us a comment on the video. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you guys. And continue to follow us. And for Steve Z, I am the SuperFosh. We'll see you guys all next time on the SuperCaZt.